Hi, I'm Brittany, a neurodivergent mum and speech pathologist. This is Not Just Theories, where I share what actually works in my real, messy life. Because life doesn't follow a theory. Here's what I actually do. Hello, and welcome back to Not Just Theories. Today, we are diving into one of my favourite parts of language therapy, which is robust vocabulary instruction. Today is the first of 3 episodes focused on robust vocabulary instruction. Today is the theory and what I do in my actual therapy sessions at work. And over the next 2 sessions after today, we'll be talking about how I actually do the same approach at home in books and how I also target robust vocabulary in play. So today is a little bit more theory heavy, but the idea is that by the end of this mini series on vocabulary, you'll be able to understand a little bit about how and why to choose specific vocabulary words to help support your child. And this approach is really aimed at that sort of 3 to 5 year age bracket. It can be adapted to be for younger or older children, but that's the key age group that I currently use it with. We'll be talking about a magic number of 36 and how you can use structured book reading to help children learn richer, more precise words, because that's what I do in my actual sessions. So it's all about embedding vocabulary into structured book reading today. Next session will be about embedding vocabulary into unstructured book reading. And then the final session in 2 weeks' time will be robust vocabulary instruction in play. So if you're a parent of a child with a language delay or just somebody who'd like to help give your child richer, more meaningful vocabulary, this one is for you. Today, we're starting with the theory, just enough so that the whole approach makes sense. There is a large body of research suggesting that children need around 36 meaningful exposures to a new word to really learn it. So that's not just hearing it in passing, it's hearing it in context, hearing the word explained in a child-friendly way and having chances to use it themselves or think about how to use that word in their real life. The other theory that is behind this approach is Beck and McKeown's work on tiers of vocabulary. The idea with the tiers of vocabulary is that there are 3 tiers, and tier 2 words are the sweet spot for boosting both depth and breadth of vocabulary. So we're going to drill down into those tiers of vocabulary a little bit because it's one of the key foundations of this approach, aiming for tier 2. When you're thinking about those tiers, tier 1 are your basic everyday words. Words like dog or happy or run or banana. They're words that kids will be hearing often multiple times every day. You don't necessarily need to do anything special for them to know what they mean because they're often quite apparent just from the repetition, or they're very concrete things like a dog or, a banana. So they're not words that a lot of kids need huge amounts of support to get, or particularly not after the age of about 3. So they might be words that you're teaching the younger children. Tier 2 vocabulary, these are more precise and they're often much more interesting words that children can use across different contexts. So if you're thinking about a word like sad being tier 1, the word devastated would be the tier 2 equivalent of that word. Or if tired is a tier 1 word, then exhausted is a tier 2 version. So it's just that little bit more elevated, a little bit more specific. And children are less likely to be hearing these words every day without reading lots of books or coming across more complex ideas. But they're still words that you can use on a daily basis, as opposed to tier 3 words, which are specialist words. They're subject specific. So they're words like photosynthesis or isotope, or if we take that sad, devastated example from before, sad being tier 1, devastated being tier 2, a tier 3 equivalent of that might be something like clinically depressed. So these are not words that are particularly useful children or outside of their subject-specific area. Tier 2 words are the bridge between everyday conversation and the more complex academic language that children will eventually need to know. So that's where we want to focus a lot of our energy. So the structure I use in therapy. In therapy sessions, I use something called the robust vocabulary intervention, which is where I choose 6 tier 2 target words for a given book. And this is the real structure. We prepare flashcards. On the flashcards, we have the written word itself, a child-friendly definition, and an image that matches the meaning that we're teaching. This is obviously not something that we expect parents to do at home, is prepare the flashcards, but it is a fantastic learning tool, which is what I'll be talking about throughout this session. We use those flashcards to aim for a minimum of 6 meaningful exposures to the word, to each of those 6 words, per book reading. And to do that, we do 2 exposures before the book, 2 exposures during the book, and 2 exposures after the book. Minimum. We might end up doing more than that. And we break it into 3 sections. The orientation before we read the book. So the 2 exposures that I tend to do at that point is I'll show the flashcard and the picture, and I'll say the word. And then I will say the word again with a child-friendly definition. So if my target word was devastated, our example from earlier, what I would then say is show a picture with a really upset person, and I would say, devastated. This picture is devastated. And then I would define it. Devastated means really, really sad and upset. I would then keep that flashcard and then do our 2 exposures during the book. So as I'm reading the book, when the word comes up naturally in the story, it might say, Sophie was devastated when she dropped her ice cream. I would say that sentence about Sophie and the ice cream, and then I would pause and say, I just heard one of our magic words. Can you help me find devastated over here? So I'd take them back to those 6 pictures, give the child an opportunity to remember the word themselves and see if they could find it. If they don't, it's no pressure. It's not a test. It's just a little fun game. And I'll say, it's this one. This is the picture that shows devastated. Here, that's how Sophie was feeling about her ice cream. So Sophie was feeling devastated about her ice cream. And then I continue with the story. So there's no pressure for the child to imitate the word or anything like that. I'm just drawing attention back to that magic word without disrupting the story too much. After we finish reading the book, I'm aiming for another 2 exposures meaningfully to that word. So I will show the flashcard again, and then I'll use it in a prepared example sentence. So not the sentence from a book, but it'll be a different sentence, maybe one that matches the picture. So if the picture was of a boy who looked devastated because he had hurt his leg or something like that, I might say, oh no, he's devastated. He hurt his leg and he really didn't want to. It's made him really, really upset and devastated. These are examples off the top of my head. I probably should have gotten some of my pre-prepared ones so that my sentences made more sense, but hopefully you get the idea. And if you do that at least 2 exposures before, during, and after the book reading, that's at least 6 solid meaningful exposures in one session per word. So you can do this for multiple words. We tend to aim for 6, but we do vary it based on child. So some children don't have the attention to sit there and do 6 flashcards before a book, but they will do 2, and that's okay. That's how many we do. And if we were to read the same book 3 times a week for 2 weeks, that's 36 exposures to each target word. And that's without even counting any extra times families might use the word in conversation throughout the day, which I think a lot of people automatically do when they know that it's a target word for their child in a book. It brings the word to the top of their mind. And anytime there's an opportunity to use it throughout the day, parents are then more likely to do so. And they'll go, that's our magic word from our book. Do you remember? devastated, and use it naturally throughout the day. So that's one of the things I really like about this approach, is that structured book reading really just helps parents identify some words that might be good to show their children throughout the day, and identify those opportunities for that richer language rather than just using a word like sad. They're more likely to use that tier 2 vocabulary naturally in conversation. So that's 36 exposures minimum to each word, often more, because you'll find that you don't just do 2 before, during, and after. You'll naturally do a third or a fourth. Or if the child gets really engaged in the activity, they might want to tell a little story about, devastated. That's like when I was told yesterday that I couldn't have another episode of Bluey. I was devastated. It can be quite fun trying to think of a little story from the child's life that word is relevant to. The important part about this is that the service model that I work in is parent training focused. We only have a really limited number of sessions in community health with each family, and we don't have enough time to do direct therapy multiple times a week with every child who's referred to us. So almost everything we do is training the parents or the carers to do therapy at home with their child. Even though when I'm doing these structured flashcards in therapy, my goal in that session is not to teach that word to that child. My ultimate goal is for parents to understand what tier 2 vocabulary is, how to target it naturally in a book reading activity, and we use those flashcards to start with. But I do want parents to understand that this is something that they can take into their daily life, into the way they read books at home, into the way they have conversations with their child, so that children are getting that richer input rather than the simpler input that it is so easy to start giving children, particularly if they already have a language delay. It's easier not to use hard words sometimes. So once parents can understand that structure and many words to aim for, it's easier to go off script and embed it into daily life, whether you're in the car or in the bath or you're playing with your child. Another reason that I love this system is that it helps us find each child's sweet spot for how many exposures they need. So some children might nail the new word after just 12 exposures, and we learn that we can cycle through the words much more quickly. Other children might need more than 36 exposures, and that's not a problem. We just keep working with the family to find that magic number. And this helps us set really realistic expectations. If we've done a full 36 exposures and the word still isn't sticking, it's not because the child isn't listening or isn't trying. It's simply that they need more repetition to learn new words, and that's just how their brain works. So the whole idea of, this structured learning rather than targeting vocabulary in play, it's a tricky one because we know that generally children learn vocabulary more quickly when it's embedded in play, and they need fewer repetitions. They might not need that full 36. So yes, I do absolutely try and use the target words during play in my sessions. Often after we've done that book reading activity, I'll have tried to put some toys out that might give us a natural opportunity to model the same words or a couple of the same words. But, and this is, I guess, where we're getting into that not just theories part, this structured book reading method for me in sessions is less about that child and it's more about the parent. I use the structure as a teaching tool for parents, showing them what tier 2 vocabulary looks like and how to give a child-friendly definition, and helping them understand how often to repeat a word in a way that's meaningful rather than just saying the word without context. So we use this structured approach as a stepping stone towards that parent naturally weaving robust vocabulary into everyday life. Final takeaways. So as we go into the next 2 podcast episodes about using this approach in unstructured book reading and in unstructured play or daily routines, the key theory to remember going forward is Targeting tier 2 vocabulary gives your child richer and more precise words that they can use everywhere. So we're still targeting helpful words that are going to help your child communicate with other people meaningfully. We're not aiming for the academic words that don't have as much use in daily life. 36 meaningful exposures is the research-backed starting point. So it's not a magic bullet, but it's a guide. And once you work out for your child how many repetitions they need, you can then work more towards that. So 36 meaningful exposures was based on this research with children with language delays. So if your child doesn't have a language delay, you might find they need many fewer than that. And some children have delays that mean that they need more than that. And that's okay. You don't need to be feeling good or bad about how many repetitions it takes. It's just how many repetitions it takes. The other takeaway is that structured programs, while they aren't particularly child-led, have a really good place in education and supporting parents, because I think sometimes being told, oh, you need to do tier 2 vocabulary when you're talking to your child, it doesn't make sense necessarily to somebody who doesn't have as many years of formal training in what vocabulary is as a speech pathologist. Whereas once you've really done this approach with guides and examples of what tier 2 vocabulary is and how to give child-friendly definitions, if a parent's done that with a few different books, it's much easier then to take those basic principles into real life. So this structured approach really helps people build confidence and skill before they're moving into those more natural, flexible approaches. So if you're listening to this and you've never done this approach before, it's entirely new to you, I do have a free downloadable example of the flashcards with some written instructions on how to use them on my Teachers Pay Teachers store. So I can link that in the show notes. Please, feel free to download it, give it a go with your child. I'm also happy to help people brainstorm tier 2 words for some of their child's favorite books. So if you have a book and you really wanting to know what kind of words that are in that book that you might want to do this approach with, message me on Instagram. I'm at Not Just Theories, and I'm happy to help you come up with some ideas and some child-friendly definitions. If you've tried that out, I would love to hear how it's worked for you. Has your child learned a new big word that they're suddenly using throughout the day? I think that's sometimes one of the best things about this approach is that when you've targeted specific vocabulary and then a few weeks later you hear your child use that, it can just be that lovely little reinforcement of what you're doing is working. But yes, we will be talking next week and the week after about how to take these ideas of the 36 meaningful exposures, using the child-friendly definition and taking it into daily life. And I hope that it's helpful for you. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss those next 2 episodes expanding on this topic. Thank you for joining me today. I'd just like you all to remember that it's a great theory to be doing this structured book reading, but if you try it out with your kid and it's not for them, that's okay too. Don't put any pressure on yourself. It is about finding the right fit for your child, and this might not be it. But yes, I look forward to speaking with you all next week. Until then, take care. Thanks so much for listening to Not Just Theories. I really appreciate you being here. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow, leave us a rating or review, or just share this episode with someone else who you think might find it comforting or useful. I hope to see you back here soon.